Hi, how are you?
Fine, and you?
Hello, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hello, you're all welcome. You're all welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Because of the number of people that we are expecting, it will not be possible for us to
Good morning.
Introduce ourselves. That's going to take quite a long time. So you can introduce yourself via the chat, just a brief introduction, so we know who is here and where you're joining us from. Well, I'll start with the introduction now. My name is Maureen Duru. I'm the founder and the director with the Food Bridge. Some of you may already know the Food Bridge and the work we do, but for those that are not familiar with our work, the Food Bridge is a non-profit organization that is based in Brussels. We focus on promoting food cultures, and we do this because we believe that you cannot offer solutions to food security or the challenges without understanding the food culture of the people. So we believe that the food culture is a very important development tool. The work we do, we concentrate on four main areas. One is protection of indigenous food systems and culture. The other is, excuse me, access to acceptable and nutritious food, research and education, and the economic empowerment. But we have an overarching theme in all that we do, and that is African diaspora entrepreneurship, especially in the agro-food sector. We've been working with different partners to provide support to members of the African diaspora that are working in the agro-food sector. And we've been fortunate enough to have the support of Coleacp. We signed a memorandum of understanding with Coleacp in January this year. And the aim is to work together with them to leverage the inputs of the African diaspora in the agro-food sector. They recognize and understand the contributions that people from the African diaspora can make in the development of Africa. And so far, this seminar today is one of the series of activities and projects that we planned with Coleacp. Today will be more of a general presentation and focusing on the issues that are affecting us now, which is the challenges of the COVID-19. After this, we have other projects and other seminars and workshops that we are organizing together with Coleacp that will be more specific. And I'm hoping also that those of you that are here will be able to also reach out to them where you need their services or where you need certain clarifications regarding the presentations, the presentation of the DG of Coleacp today. Members of the African diaspora agro-food entrepreneurs platform, we have sort of a loose network of people from the diaspora that are working in different countries in the agro-food sector. We try to organize ourselves and liaise with organizations and individuals that can make an input in the work we do. And in April, on the 17th, we already had a seminar, and the focus was understanding the impact of the COVID-19 on agro-food entrepreneurs. And all the participants shared the challenges, the things that are quite peculiar to those that are from the diaspora that are working in this sector. We understand that it's a difficult period for everyone, especially those that are self-standing or that have their own entrepreneurial project. But the African diaspora, their challenges are quite unique because we live in countries that are away from Africa, and when there are challenges or issues like this, it's difficult to really know where do you go to, where do you get help from? Because in Africa, it's challenging. You're seen as someone that is living outside the continent. And then in the countries where you live, because the projects that you're working on are not, are not in those countries, sometimes it's quite difficult to get the right support. So we are hoping that with the presentation today, those of you that have liaised with us in the past and have asked several questions regarding support and facilities that might be available, that you will have some of the answers that you've been seeking, and also information. And do not hesitate to follow up with Coleacp even after this or through our organization. In terms of questions after the presentation, you can already, if you have any issue that you want to comment on as the presentation is going on, or questions, you can also write it down via the chat. Mr. Jeremy Knops, who is the DG of Coleacp, that will be making the presentation, he will answer all your questions at the end of the presentation. And if there are any that maybe due to time factor we are not able to take, you will get a response sent directly to you after the seminar. Thank you very much. Now, I introduce the speaker, Mr. Jeremy Knops, who is the Delegate General for Coleacp. He's quite experienced in the sector that he's working on. I've known him for quite a while, and he has really been of great support to a lot of people that are working in this sector, not just because of his position, but because it's something that he really cares about, the challenges. He understands it, and he appreciates some of the peculiar circumstances that we have to navigate, especially those of us from Africa. Jeremy, please, you can now take over.
Thank you very much, Maureen, and good morning to everybody. I will start by sharing my screen. So I hope everybody can see now the presentation. So thank you very much, Maureen, for the introduction and for your kind words. Thank you to all of you for attending this session. We'll be spending slightly more than an hour together. And we'll try to structure this time we have together in three main parts. I'll try and give an overview, obviously, of Coleacp and the kind of sectoral remit we are operating in. Then I'll talk about the COVID-19 situation, and through our lens and our own experience, which is not exhaustive, which doesn't tackle everything, but we're trying to share with you a couple of insights of what we've been going through with our constituency during the past almost 3 months. And then we'll have kind of a speed session on access to EU markets. And the reason for that is that accessing EU markets was originally really the raison d'être of Coleacp for agri-food operators throughout Africa, Caribbean, Pacific countries. And then obviously do our best to leave some time for questions, and should we won't have enough time for all the questions, obviously, as Maureen said, it's important for us to have a look at those questions. So if you can put them in the chat, and if we don't have the time during this session to answer all of your preoccupations and questions, we'll answer them afterwards on a bilateral basis or through a frequently asked questions section we can set up with Maureen around these topics. As Maureen introduced, this is really the start of the operationalization, I would say, of a partnership between the Food Bridge and Coleacp. From the start, from the first day I met Maureen, I was convinced by the vision, by the drive, and by the professionalism of Maureen. And beyond Maureen as a person, if we take a step back, I think this partnership also translates the reality and the importance of the African diaspora in a number of sectors, obviously across Africa. In our case, we'll be focusing on the agri-food sector, and the start of this partnership is really in recognition of the need on our side, on Coleacp's side, to focus more and try to the best of our ability to provide some more specific answers and support for, I would say, this constituency, being the African diaspora. So first part, Coleacp, and I mentioned that the last section would be focusing more specifically on a kind of a crash course on accessing EU markets. I just want to spend a bit of time here on Coleacp, who we are and our mission. So Coleacp, we are a private sector membership-based organization, not for profit. We were established in 1973, and the mission really at the time of the association, which was initially set up by players on the fruit and veg industry, European players, but also players from Africa, Caribbean, Pacific countries, companies, associations of those companies, importers, so private sector players of the fruit and veg sector. The idea was really to set up an association to support these trade flows of fruit and veg between Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries and the EU. Now that mission has been evolving, and as you can see, we're also talking more and more of the trade taking place at a domestic, regional, intra-regional level between ACP countries within sub-Saharan Africa, and obviously still between those countries and the European Union, as with other trading partners around the world. And that has been really, I would say, one of the major evolutions during the past, which has been accelerating during these past 5 years. It's this increasing importance of the trade and opportunities taking place at a domestic and regional level. From the start, from the inception of Coleacp, there was and there still is this idea that we should not be separating or isolating different markets and different value chains, in a sense that we firmly believe that the advances which can be made through trading on more formalized markets, well, those advances and those the progress that's realized in terms of organization of operators' competencies, well, has to benefit obviously value chains and operators which are maybe solely active on less formal markets at the domestic and regional level. But the major difference now is that we have the emergence of more and more, I would say, more kind of formalized, organized trade flows and markets taking place at a domestic and regional level. The DNA, the vision really of the organization is encapsulated by growing people, and growing people is our belief, and that's our small contribution relies primarily around competencies, skills, know-how, knowledge, information, human capital, and that's where we're focusing transversally across all our activities, all the topics we're dealing with throughout the agri-food sector, with a specific focus in the fruit and veg industry. So as I mentioned, we're an association. So as such, we're governed by a board of directors, which is elected by the General Assembly. General Assembly is formed by the members. We have around 500 individual members, and those members again are, for most of them, are MSMEs in sub-Saharan Africa, producing, trading, processing fruit and veg primarily, and selling those products on domestic, regional and international markets, amongst which the EU. We also have a number of EU importers, because that's obviously still very important and embedded within the name of Coleacp, Comité de Liaison Europe, Afrique, Caraïbes, Pacifique. And we have a number of service providers working throughout the ecosystem, freight forwarders, service providers, even training centers, so a number of competent authorities which we're increasingly working with. The chairman of our association is from Ghana, Mr. Stephen Minter. He's the CEO of SPEG, which is the Sea Freight Pineapple Exporters and Producers growers from Ghana. And our board of directors is made out of half operators from Africa, Caribbean and Pacific countries, and the other half from operators in the EU market. So there's a very wide diversity in terms of membership within the organization. We have some very, very large companies, some of which are amongst the biggest in the fruit and veg world. We have some very big, we have some airlines, so we have very big companies, but we have also much smaller entities, which form really the majority of the membership and the core focus of our interventions. Just to give a quick figure, because MSMEs, agri-food MSMEs are the core focus of our interventions. In terms of size, we're talking about for the majority of the entities of companies with a turnover of less than 170,000 euros, and for a quarter of all the entities we're working with, it's less than 70,000 euros. So it just gives a kind of size of an idea of the size of the MSMEs we're mostly dealing with, and I'll provide you with more figures later on. And so as an association, well, we perform the core activities, and I'll have a look at the services later on, but I just wanted to highlight that obviously most of our activities are possible because we raise funds basically in partnership with institutions and various donors, and so here, just to give you an idea of the different programs at the moment which we are managing. So there are two intra-ACP programs, so with the support of the organization of the ACP of the African, Caribbean, Pacific states, the Fit for Market and Fit for Market SPS, with funding under the 11th European Development Fund. And then we have a number of country programs, some of which are with the WTO. It's the case of the STDF programs in Cameroon, Togo, and Guinea. But then we also have a specific program now starting in Kenya, with also some resources from the EU, also funded partially under the Fit for Market programs by the French Development Agency. And so that's really cool for us. I mean, it's the setting up of these programs, because it's through those programs that we have the means to be able to deliver fully on the services of the association. Common points of all these programs is that the objective is to facilitate market access. And it's facilitating market access through improving competitiveness of agri-food operators, with a core focus on the compliance elements and resilience. So when I say compliance, it's being able to respect standards, regulatory, commercial standards, which are required by buyers, markets, regulations. And when we look at the resilience, it's really on anticipating, developing the business development plans of entities in order to make them more robust and agile. So I mentioned all those programs. So from an operational point of view, we function through a number of services. Again, I mentioned growing people, so it's about human capital. So obviously technical assistance training plays a big part in all our activities. We have an innovation and development department where we're looking at topics ranging from new crop protection techniques to information and communication technologies and their application to the agri-food sector. Namely, for instance, we have been working and testing blockchain technology for traceability. We're working quite a lot on some biopesticides and integrated pest management solutions at the moment. Market intelligence, that's really the service which enables us to gather kind of a bird's eye view on trends, market trends, through the collection of data at a macro, meso, and micro level on evolution of markets and consumer demands. Business development, well, that's within the core nature of the association, being a private sector association. It's also linking up members together and linking up our networks with other networks. Hence the importance of and an example of this partnership with Foodbridge. Advocacy, extremely important, especially in the light of a number of situations that we're going through. Tariff, import tariff reviews, evolutions of plant health or sanitary regulations, evolution of the organic regulations, all of that. I mean, we're following extremely closely, and we're there to defend the interests of companies operating in Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries. And information and communication today obviously is key, and even I would say even more key probably today more than ever, when physical encounters have become more tricky. But information and communication is a core service within Coleacp, and it's not only about just providing information, it's also working with associations in the countries where we operate to build their own information and communication services. And the same goes on the training side and technical assistance. The idea and the whole methodology relies on a network of trainers and experts, which we've been working for and during the past 20 years to build up throughout 50 countries in order to deliver all this support, and also progressively, obviously, outsource and build up the competencies to develop their own training units within professional associations, or to strengthen some curricula within training centres, universities, etc. Like the topics we're working on are pretty broad today. We have some core focus on food safety and plant health, which has driven a lot of our activities I would say, since beginning of the years 2000. While today we're working more on business management and development aspects. Obviously, the environmental dimension is fundamental, and that's fully integrated within all of the support we provide. On training methodologies in themselves, so it's not only about transferring technical and strengthening technical skills, but it's also the skills on how to transfer messages to various target groups. On the social accountability and empowerment side, so within organizations, within companies, how to manage human resources, how to make the best, and how to make sure that we reduce staff turnover, build up the competencies of the staff, ensure decent working conditions for all. On the processing side, a key area today of focus, obviously, even more in the COVID-19 context, and I'll come back to that later. So a wide range of topics which are worked upon through the different services, and which translate themselves really into individual projects. And so the way we work really is we are demand-driven action, I would say, organization. So in order to trigger some support, we need to receive a request for intervention. During the past 4 years, we received 950 individual projects for support across 53 countries. Now, those 950 projects can be divided, I would say, in two big groups. So we have slightly more than 500 of the 950 projects which are directly established with individual MSMEs. Producing, processing, trading fruit and veg, and the other half of the projects, or the 450 remaining projects, are established with really the enabling environment of the companies, and within that enabling environment, we have a number of key target groups. So competent authorities, so national plant protection organisations, inspection services, ministries of agriculture. Fundamental today in order to have a robust, I would say, industry and robust industry to trade with other countries, being in the region or internationally. We have training centres, we have the professional associations, so the representation of the entities which represent the interests of the companies in each country. Obviously, local trainers, service providers, laboratories, and civil society actors, small-scale farmer support structures. So within that group of the enabling environment, they won't be working exactly in the same way or necessarily through the same modalities than we are with MSMEs, because of different type of actors. But the goal is common. It's working through capacity building, technical assistance, to strengthen the overall competitiveness of the sectors and make sure the agri-food sector, and specifically in our case, the fruit and veg industry, plays its part in terms of employment, income generation for farmers, and overall spillovers to other sectors of the economy, of the economies. So I just wanted now to sort of define kind of the perimeter and remit of Coleacp. I took a bit of time to do so because I believe it's quite important, especially during this first session. I just want to share a couple of insights on some trends and markets. So as I said, historically we're very focused on the EU market. Well, this has evolved during the past couple of years. So why has it evolved? Well, firstly, because our members and the constituency were responding to a new reality of markets around them. And this first graph here is just kind of an illustration of what has been happening during the past 15 years. So this is a study that we'll be publishing in a couple of weeks now, hopefully. And it just shows kind of total exports of fresh fruit and vegetable and processed fruit and vegetable from sub-Saharan Africa. We're excluding South Africa we had to exclude South Africa from the analysis because of the volumes in themselves dealt by South Africa, which make comparisons and evolutions a bit trickier. So we're focusing on sub-Saharan Africa, excluding South Africa. What we can see here is that there are two quite of interesting elements. First of all, when you look at the kind of green line, well, you see that it has kind of overtaken the orange line. So the green line is basically Asia, East Asia market in terms of volumes, which has become a market where more produce is sold than the European Union. So that's the first observation we can make from this graph. The second observation we can make is the very interesting evolution of sub-Saharan trade, sub-Saharan African trade. So within regions and between regions. And we see very interestingly, and again, so we took 3 years to build the study. So it has been done in collaboration with the International Food Policy Research Institute and through a number of local experts and statistic offices. So it's extremely difficult to capture all the trade taking place in sub-Saharan Africa. There are a number of caveats, and we present that in the full study that we will be able to share with you in the coming weeks. But what we are sure is that there has been a major upward trends in terms of volumes of produce traded within sub-Saharan Africa, and as a matter of fact, because as you see the figures here are 2017, international consolidation of data takes always a while. We should be able to have the 2018 data, which confirms this in a short while. But basically, when we look at volumes of produce traded within sub-Saharan Africa, it has overtaken also or is approximately the same as the produce that's traded within with the EU, which is kind of important, and which confirms this trend and these demands coming from the operators that we're working with throughout the different countries, which have been requesting more and more support along those lines, and the characteristics of the operators have been evolving. So I would say almost entire majority of companies exporting produce to the EU are also selling produce on domestic and regional markets. The other way, it's not. So all companies producing and selling produce on domestic and regional markets are not necessarily exporting fresh produce. But what we've seen is a very drastic evolution in terms of the share of importance of the European market in the turnover of the companies that we've been working with, to the advantage of markets to domestic and regional level. It's another way to represent it. And this shows today, like in terms of again in terms of volumes, not in terms of value. So when we look at value, the EU is still the number one market, but values are very difficult to work with throughout a number of years. So we need to stick to the analysis for the time being in volumes. As you can see here on the graph, the weight of the kind of relative importance of the EU market when it comes to volumes has evolved quite impressively, from 50% to 24%, where you have sub-Saharan Africa, which moved from 15 to 25, and this Asian market from 25 to 39. So these are real evolutions, and this has really taken place. Just if I focus on one country, which was very well known for exporting produce to and fresh fruit and veg to the European Union. If we look at Kenya, for instance, Kenya 10 years ago, the European market in volume was representing more than 85% of the destination market. 10 years later, so today, it's slightly above 50% of Kenyan fruit and veg in volume, which go to the European market. In value, we're still at 70%. So there's obviously a difference volume value, but there's a trend, and the trend is there to stay, and most probably to accelerate. Here, just wanted to share with you kind of a very quick overview, and there are two stories I'd just like to share. So, first of all, this is including bananas. I just wanted to share this slide to show the importance of the banana product in itself, which is the number one product of fruits traded all over the world. So this just to show the kind of relative weight of bananas when we look at fresh fruit and veg, which is exported from sub-Saharan Africa to the EU. If we look at all exports from ACP countries of fresh fruit and veg to the EU, we are at approximately 1.6 million tons, and bananas account, I would say, for almost a million. Just bananas. So it's just to give an idea there of the kind of importance of bananas in the overall trade. This analysis is very interesting because we exclude bananas again, because if we want to deep dive and see some of the other evolutions. So you see that, for instance, well, we're not working with the same scales because we wanted to deep dive in 2019 on some of the figures. Still, you've had some evolutions here. So Ivory Coast, which was at 200,000 tons of fruit and veg exported to the European Union in 2002, well, today is at between 80 and 90. What has happened there? Well, it has been the collapse of one value chain, collapse of the pineapple value chain. In 2002, there were almost 200,000 tons of pineapple exported from Côte d'Ivoire to the European Union. In a couple of years, because there hadn't been the right, there had been a very aggressive competitor strategy emerging from another part of the world with a new variety. That value chain almost collapsed. Just to give you an idea of when we talk about pineapples on the European market, we're looking at approximately 1 million tons imported by the European Union from all over the world of pineapples, and 900,000 tons come from Costa Rica. Just to give an idea of the kind of volumes and weights we can be dealing with. So just that's one story on pineapple and Côte d'Ivoire. The other story is more kind of a success story, because it's Senegal, and you see the position of Senegal now in 2019. Well, Senegal, as a matter of fact, is exporting more fresh produce than Kenya now to the European Union. Fresh produce, not processed. So one of the challenges in the case of Senegal is to obviously move up on the processing side. Nonetheless, the kind of improvement done on the fresh side is extremely impressive, and it is one of the success stories of these past 10 to 15 years. Just a very quick deep dive in terms of products which are progressing well, and others maybe not so much. Just you see on the left for fruits. So the pineapple story is illustrative. Have kind of a downward trend during the past 10 years when we look at compounded annual growth rates. More encouraging, it's the mango and avocado story, and there's still a lot of room for growth on those sides. For smaller commodities and smaller products on the watermelon, also a lot of demand, and especially driven by Senegal. But overall here on the fruit side, two products to look out for: avocados and mangoes when we look at the European market. And still on the vegetable side, when we look at the European market, maybe two products, and we've received an increasing number of applications for support on those kind of products. When we look at leafy all the leafy vegetables, and we group in the category of ethnic vegetables, ethnic roots and tubers. Those are products which have really been growing in terms of demands on the markets. A smaller one to be looking at, sweet potatoes, but with again some major competitive forces in place. For instance, the 80-90% of sweet potatoes today within the EU are imported from the United States. But we think that there's a potential there in terms of different types of varieties, again targeting different markets, but it's clearly growing in terms of consumer demand. So there are much more conclusions and trends to be shared with you, but obviously for the purpose of time I can't be more exhaustive, but we have studies and we have materials which go more in depth, and at the end of the month we'll have two kind of major studies which we'll be sharing. It's one really focusing on the domestic, within sub-Saharan Africa, on domestic and regional trade flows in fruit and veg, and the other one will be an update of the perspectives of the European market for fruit and veg coming from Africa, Caribbean and Pacific countries. So a couple of key messages. It's always important, and this is something we always emphasize on this kind of comparative advantage analysis to be performed when we're looking at exports to the European Union, looking at competing origins in function of the destination markets per crop, etc. The trend of processing, clearly that's something extremely important. We see a huge potential for some countries, probably more than others, in terms of import substitution, and maybe the kind of thumb rule for exports. It's first and foremost, it's about quality, quantity, reliability, price, and that's kind of the kind of rule we try to follow. But that's a prerequisite. Once you have that, then you start competing with a number of on a number of other elements. But those are the first things that really need to be achieved, and a careful analysis and business analysis needs to be performed when comparing the risks and advantages of targeting an export market versus focusing more on the domestic or neighboring countries' markets. I'll be following now with section 2, so with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I'll say immediately, we don't have all the answers, and obviously our views and are biased because we only represent part of an agri-food sector which can be facing various dynamics in function of the regions, the countries, regions within countries, and so we don't have all the answers, and I will not pretend to have all of them. So these are humble, I would say, observations based on daily interactions with operators throughout sub-Saharan Africa. From the start, we were fearing and are still fearing that obviously the socioeconomic impact of the entire COVID-19 situation could be and is in some cases already quite disastrous. What if we had to identify maybe one element, it has been around logistics, transport, movement of persons, movement of products, that for sectors which are very reliant towards export markets, they've really felt the hit very strongly, and still are. There are no solutions, and even on a regional basis, a lot of the transport logistical conditions have been disrupted. It was also about the movement of persons, so not being able to have the labour in time, and depending on the regions, the planting seasons, the effects have been more or less and are more or less controlled or more severe. One element that we've been communicating from the start, and which we feel very strongly about, is also not to forget that as a whole, the continent is still, unfortunately, dependent on the number of imports for overall food security. not only for direct crops, but also in terms of seeds, fertilizers, crop protection products. So that has brought a number of issues for a number of sectors in quite a lot of countries. What we've seen is a direct impact for companies basically to be able to continue to operate, like all over the world now. So with a massive impact on turnover, which for an MSME can be very dramatic. Without cash for 1 or 2 months, unfortunately, in some cases it means directly bankruptcy, and that's what we've seen in a number of countries for I would say the smaller, weaker players. And we hope that as soon as possible, but again, it's a country analysis because the conditions are very different from one country to the other, that operations will be able to restart as soon as possible. In other countries, it's going more smoothly than in others. Overall impact on turnover, impact obviously on labor, impact on revenues of farmers who are supplying those I would say more formalized operators, being on the processing or trading side. Very strong impact on being able just to bring the food from production to the markets, with also the disruption of consumers being able to access the markets. So I would say that's in a nutshell what we've been hearing, observing, and trying to react upon. So three dimensions of our action today, through our current I would say financial resources and ongoing intervention programs, which I shared with you early on. One first dimension is on this health and safety, and when we say health and safety, obviously, it's to equip the MSMEs with the competencies and tools to implement the preventive measures, being able to function while implementing the preventive measures recommended by the WHO. Second dimension, it's on this socioeconomic impact of COVID-19. So here we're really looking at how to build a contingency plan, how to manage cash, how to manage your HR in times of crisis, and we did our best, obviously, of course, to try and link up and liberate some financial capacity and facilities through financial intermediaries. Unfortunately, that has not been very successful. Lots of kind of financial intermediaries and players simply not. Even before COVID-19, the major issues for MSMEs in the agri-food sector is on how to access funds. And when you say how to access funds, it's how to access financial means which amount, I would say, rather in tens of thousands of euros rather than in hundreds of thousands of euros. And there's a big gap on the market for that. So it's a constantly repeat the gap for the backbone of the agri-food sector, being formalized cooperatives, MSMEs, which have a true potential for growth. That the real gap in terms of financial availability is on those financial products which amount in tens of thousands of euros. Now that hasn't been facilitated with the COVID-19 situation and has been aggravated. But where we can focus is on accompanying technically on the capacity side, the companies to maybe rethink their business model, to have kind of very simple tools to be able to monitor very closely their costs, and trying to foresee the best strategy in terms of human resources management to deal with the situation. That we can do, and we are doing. And number three, it's looking at it from the perspective of food security and nutrition. So on that side, we've been very engaged on the logistical side to provide up-to-date information on what kind of logistical solutions were available on the international trade side, which for us was kind of also a priority, also from the perspective of inflows and not only on outflows from the continent. But it's also about equipping a number of relay organizations and intermediaries with very simple tools to be able to maybe provide a first kind of centralization of information on what produce is available from different types of operators, and try to reorientate the produce that's not absorbed by disrupted distribution channel. It's reorientating those products to other processing units or other potential buyers. So that's through online, I would say, an online tool which we have been and are piloting with a number of professional associations. Obviously, as everybody has been saying, yes, a number of digital solutions can help, but still today, I mean, it does not make the bulk of how consumers access food throughout sub-Saharan Africa. So yes, for some markets, for some niche markets, it can be a solution for some operators, but it will not represent the majority of how consumers access food. But nonetheless, there's a growing potential, obviously, on that side. So yeah, the whole idea is it's encapsulated really through this objective of enabling smallholder farming groups and MSMEs to still be able to produce and sell and improve their access to markets while implementing the preventive COVID-19 health and safety recommendations. And we have a number of work streams around that to contribute on our side. Again, we don't have all the answers. We are not able to do everything, but this is kind of the approach that we've been following during the past almost 3 months, and which we're still working on very, very intensively. Third section now of this first seminar, and initially when exchanging with Maureen, this was really the initial one of the initial remits and focus, and Maureen was telling me, yes, Jeremy, lots of my constituency, they really need to have the kind of toolbox on the ABC on how to access the EU markets. And so we had quite a lot of exchanges with Maureen, and I said, yeah, well, accessing EU markets, we can summarize it probably quite quickly, as I'll try to do in a couple of minutes. But obviously each one of these topics would need to be explored more in depth should we be really looking into competency building and on the really knowledge, know-how, and really doing it into practice. So again, this section does not is not meant to be an answer in itself. It's an introduction to the main things we will be looking at when aiming at exporting, especially fresh produce to the EU market. One of the sources here I would like to highlight for this section, which is extremely well done. It's on the CBI portal, so it's I can give you the reference afterwards, where you have a number of reference documents and the directives and a number of tools to support more in practice per product what really you need to be complying with. The EU Export Help Desk is also extremely useful when some details need to be looked at, and obviously we have a number of resources on our side. And the section I'll be presenting to you now is really a summary of the very didactic and pedagogical way CBI has presented the kind of three main areas to be looking at when accessing, when willing to access the EU markets. So 3 categories of elements. We'll be looking at the kind of legal requirements the product has to comply with. Number 2, those additional requirements that buyers can be required, and what are those niche markets and how do they translate into requirements. So for food that's coming in the EU, there are a number of official controls, and we can summarize them in 3 types of controls. We have the documentary issues, we have the identity checks, and the physical checks. Those official controls are taking place on a regular basis, and it's very extremely important to highlight on this first slide that one of the main challenges we're facing in a number of countries, it's obviously that although food is traded on a bilateral basis, and when I say bilateral, it's between, let's say, or trilateral, or with 4 parties, but basically with a chain of companies, and with one producer, trader, exporter, and let's say we simplify with one exporter. So that's how it usually happens. Now the problem we're facing with official controls is that even though you're one company from one country, in case there are some non-compliances which are observed and which are registered, it can eventually affect all the other companies from that country, and that's really an extremely important point to highlight, and it is something we're struggling with for a number of value chains in a number of countries. if you have 100 companies, if you have 2 or 3 outliers within that country who sell produce to the European market and where you have non-compliances, it's the entire 100 companies which will be penalized through increased regimes of control, or even through a ban to import that produce. So what does it mean behind that? It means that a lot of our intervention strategy in each country focuses on really bringing the sector together, and usually we try to do that on a value chain basis. And it's not only on the private sector, but it's also on the public sector side. We absolutely need this private and public strategy and common understanding on how to implement the strategy from a country of origin perspective. So from say from Senegal, Côte d'Ivoire, Togo, or Benin. So everybody needs to agree on how to proceed, what rules and kind of collective discipline we'll be installing to make sure that obviously you always have 1 or 2 non-compliances, but the idea is obviously not to have repeated non-compliances, especially repeated non-compliances coming from the same operators, which at the end will jeopardize the development of the entire sector. And that collective discipline and collective interest is something that's extremely important, and that usually is materialized through a strong interprofessional local association with clear mandates, governance, and which really plays that role of bringing people together and facilitating the implementation of strategies to better control how the food gets out of the country with public authorities. So these official controls, looking at a number of things, I said documentary, physical, identity. Now, during those controls, we'll be looking at different types of contaminants. It's really on a number of elements which can be found on the food and which can be pose a risk with food quality and human health. And so we have quite specific regulations around these different types of contaminants. One of the, I would say, a big category of contaminants are pesticides, and more specifically residues of pesticides. First kind of comment here on the pesticides. Obviously, it's an element which we are working a lot on. It's a fundamental element of our work. Because crop protection is a real challenge. So on that side, you have regulations. So you have maximum residue limits of pesticides, which are established. Now you have international norms. Then you have EU norms. Sometimes EU norms in terms of limits of residues on pesticides go further than what's internationally agreed upon. But then you also have, I would say in some cases, individual buyers, major retailers, will set their own limits, and so you can already see here the kind of 3-tier information source when it comes to maximum residue limits of pesticides. Are we looking at on the international side, on the EU limits, or am I looking at what my supermarket is asking from me? So that's a challenge. It's a challenge. This lack of harmonization internationally, in terms of what is accepted and what can be sent with a very limited number of residues in function of the active substance. Another second area, it's around plant health. Now this is evolving very quickly and has been evolving even more quickly during the past 2 years with the introduction of a new EU plant health set of regime and regulations, and basically it becomes stricter and more difficult from the perspective that the EU wants to make sure that the agricultural sector in the EU is protected from external harmful organisms. So it makes it more complex, it's difficult, it's not impossible, again, but it requires a lot of work, a lot of collaboration between public sector, private sector, to make sure that per value chain, everybody agrees on the kind of strategies which need to be put in place. Again, I took the example of one company having some controls on interceptions at the borders within at EU border level. When a cluster of companies in a region of a country try to control a harmful organism or a pest, obviously they need to do it in in a coordinated way also to a certain extent, because those harmful organisms or pests don't necessarily know any borders. So if you don't adopt kind of a coherent strategy to control the dissemination of those harmful organisms and pests, not only can you have problems when you want to enter the EU market, but also, and most importantly, your entire strategy on an individual basis to control it will be jeopardized. So contaminants, plant health, marketing standards. So that's the minimum quality and maturity for all fruits and veg, which are defined. Again, all these marketing standards are available, and here I've listed the products for which they have specific some specific standards. So we have general and specific marketing standards. All that information is available through different sources, the Export Health there, CBI, and more. On the labeling and packaging side, is also a very important part, especially when I get back to the official control side. The official control side, that's where you'll sort of be looking at the, when I say identity check, so that's a lot about traceability. Traceability has been a major focus of our support during the past 20 years. Still is. It's fundamental, and what we try to do is really use the traceability route within companies to kind of restructure also and support the restructuring of all the operations within the company. Very important, mandatory. I can't add much more on this. Packaging, obviously, also, which needs to comply with a number of requisites. But one of the issues with packaging is how to access packaging for a number of countries and a number of value chains, and how to access packaging at a competitive price. So what kind of additional requirements can buyer require? So presents you the kind of broad outline of regulations. Then there are a number of private sector standards which are usually required to access some of the markets. And if we follow the observation that most of the product in Europe is sold through retailers, well, usually retailers, for most products, usually retailers will all the time ask for a number of standards to be complied with. So that's where you have the standards which you might have heard of: Global Gap, BRC, ISO 22000. Some standards are focusing more on production level, others are focusing more on the processing side, and those usually the issue, obviously, in relation to standards is the financial and technical feasibility. Financial because it has a cost, certification costs, obviously, which are recurrent, but also the initial investment the company has to make to comply with those standards. That's exactly where Coleacp kind of also intervenes to support this compliance process within companies. But then in some cases, the company will need to employ an extra person to make sure that they can continue to manage the quality management system, etc. So the number of investments, but it does enable to tap into some specific market segments which are interesting from a value perspective. One of the problems we have with standards is obviously demultiplication of standards. If you have several customers who are asked different types of standards covering the same elements, then it becomes tricky, and we are very much involved in a number of harmonization processes on the standards side to try and make that as efficient as possible, but also in the revision processes of standards in themselves. If you look at the first versions of the Global Gap standard with the versions now, there have been some major evolutions. We've been working a lot in those committees to try and make sure that they were adapted to the best possible capacity to also the reality of the operations in sub-Saharan Africa or in the Caribbean or in the Pacific, which is not always the same as within the EU. So we advocate strongly for kind of a proof of the end result rather than necessarily having to prove the mean to reach the result. And that's a very important difference there in the kind of investments that it can entail. again, we talked about some of the marketing, official marketing standards, but buyers, of course, will put an extra layer of specific quality specifications. As I said, quality, quantity, reliability, price, the basics really on how to be competitive and really the prerequisite. What requirements for niche markets? So a number of markets are really progressive. The first one, organic, clearly very strong upwards trend, especially within the EU, and huge potential, because a number of the production systems, agricultural production systems throughout sub-Saharan Africa, can easily be converted and officially recognised as being organic. But again, a lot of evolution in terms of the EU regulation on the organic side, so which might make it more trickier to sell produce under organic conditions in the future. So we're on the front line there at the moment in discussions with the EU to try to make sure that those evolutions and modifications don't entail more difficulties to comply with the organic certification schemes. It's also on the social, on the value sharing side, on environmental protection. So more and more, besides food safety, quality, this has been a trend taking place for the past 10 years. There are a number of standards and requirements specifically aimed at environmental protection, social responsibility, on decent working conditions. So obviously, a number of those requirements are becoming more and more even integrated through business-to-business certification schemes. So the consumers won't even see basically the difference, because they don't know the standard. So, for instance, the global GAP standard, it's really a B2B standard. It's not B2C, but during the past 5 years, there are a number of environmental points which have been added in the checklists there to make it, to also move with the trend of sustainability and towards more sustainable agricultural production systems. So again, we fully embrace that trend, but it needs to be done in a reasonable way. And the way we approach this through our technical assistance and training with operators is to always attach some specific measures on soil management, on water management, on waste management, to direct economic benefits the operator can take out of it, being in cost reduction or through the selling of byproducts. So there's always a business case attached to the kind of measures that the operator can and should be taking on the environmental side, and the same goes on the social side. And so that's why we developed a whole kind of self-assessment methodology and tool, which enables to have kind of a baseline situation of the company along all the pillars, the sustainability pillars, and we have a charter with a number of principles to structure that approach. And then basically we have a baseline, we have some data, and then we measure the progress with each operator following the technical assistance and training that the operator has been receiving on a collective or on an individual basis. So in summary, this is just a very short summary, but again, so the prerequisites, the competitiveness, so we have the price behind that, quantity, quality, reliability, sanitary side, which is fundamental, which is probably one of the number one difficulties and risks at the moment to continue to sell produce, fresh produce. On the processing side, obviously that is not so much or less an issue, and sustainability, which is fully embraced. And more from a regulations perspective from the European Union, the translation of the EU Green Deal through the farm to fork strategy fully embraces this, and this is there to stay and to increase. Last slide, because this was the title of the workshop, and again, these are not all the answers. This is just a couple of anticipated lessons, maybe. That we're already observing and that we're trying to work upon, given the COVID-19 situation and crisis we're facing in the short term, but also more in terms of the recovery phase in the medium to long term. Processing. We need to increasingly be focusing on adding value to the produce at source, and there are a number of ways that this can be achieved. And not necessarily through heavy investments or complex technology. So there are different types of processing. To be very pragmatic here, I mean, when we have fresh produce that's there and that can't reach the market, or consumers can't reach the market, we need to find ways to not to lose that produce. And one of the ways is to process it, and we can process it in simple ways. So that's an area where we'll be increasing our focus. In terms of markets, it's diversification of the risk, not only focusing on one distribution channel or one market, one specific market, and it's looking really at the different business options which are out there. Obviously the digital anchoring, but again, that on a number of topics from an internal management perspective within companies, from access to finance, new marketplaces. So it will be true for a number of operators, not for the bulk of, at the moment, probably for the bulk of the agricultural production, where other solutions need to be found. But clearly, this is a trend. I mean, it's more than a trend; it's a core evolution of our society and economies as a whole. And we've seen that operators which were, I would say, more agile and really more equipped and more aware of different selling points that could be reached online are going through this period in a more smoother way. And last but not least, the human capital factor on the knowledge, know-how, and the mindset. It's being able to, from one day to the other, to completely switch to a new business model, a new business strategy, and implement it. So all that is put through the kind of encapsulated through this resilience aspect. Resilience can be developed through different ways, but we believe at Coleacp that for true resilience to be there, it's all about people, the teams within organizations, the capacity, the competencies, the know-how, the skills, which we constantly need to be working upon. Thank you. That was so that was it on my side for this first presentation. I'm just looking at timing. I see that took slightly more than initially foreseen. I'm gonna maybe stop sharing my screen, and thank you for your attention. It was I feel a bit lonely, of course, as usual when organising
the presentation, and I'm sure a lot of the entrepreneurs that are listening and some of the other participants have gained a lot from the points that you raised, not just in terms of the visions for Coleacp and the plans you have for the future, but also showing that COVID-19, in as much as it's a challenge, it also has opportunities that one can, gain from that. Already, we mentioned at the start, for those that didn't join us from the beginning, that if you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can type your question in the chat. Already, I have a question that came in during your presentation, Jeremy. It's from Matt, and her question, she has, I think I should say, it's about 3 questions. One is, in which countries in Africa, in Central Africa, do you have centers? I think she means Coleacp, the countries that you're working in Central Africa. Maybe you have a representative or an office. Then she wants to know, what are the lessons, what are the main lessons and the weak points from your experience, working in sub-Saharan Africa? What do you see as the weaknesses and the weak points in the agri-food sector? And what advice do you have for those that are willing to follow the Coleacp process, to use the facilities and services that you offer? Now, what advice do you have for them?
Okay, so thanks, Maureen, for that first question. Just to make sure I understood correctly, the first one was Central Africa.
Yes, Central Africa.
Yeah. So Central Africa. So I mentioned, I think during the introduction, obviously it's always extremely difficult for I find it extremely difficult to be talking about really sub-Saharan Africa as a whole, because the contexts and countries and regions are so different, and obviously but there are some common opportunities, common challenges throughout the regions, but very different contexts. So Central Africa, within Central Africa, we have different types of experiences. So I would say historically, the country where we've been most active in the Central African zone is Cameroon. So that's the country where we still are probably more active. We started a couple of years ago a number of activities in DRC, but it's an entire I would say different logic and different situation where we need to be adapting a number of our processes at the moment, and it's usually take a comparison between Nigeria and DRC because not that the countries can be directly compared, but from our perspective, these are two countries which I always say require maybe a more specific approach in themselves. Historically, we've been much less present in DRC for the simple reason that, as I said, originally Coleacp was really looking more at export trade flows, and when you look at export trade flows from fruit and veg from DRC to the EU, it's almost non-existent. It's very, very small. It has been, unfortunately, very small. So in the I would say in Central Africa, and it depends if you attach which countries you officially attach. I would say out of the 4 regions in sub-Saharan Africa, because I attach Rwanda and Burundi to East Africa rather than because they are attached officially to the East Africa group, East Africa community. I would say it's our weakest region in terms of presence, footprints, and interventions. Although we've received recently and during the past 2 years many more demands from DRC, but I believe that on DRC we should be developing a specific approach, and we're in a context, and a bit as I really started that was 5-6 years ago, our activities in Nigeria, and we only see now after 5 or 6 years the building up of a network and people who really start to really understand also how we function and what we can bring and what we can't bring. And in order to do so, we need strong relays. In Cameroon, it's the case. So in DRC at the moment, we probably don't yet have the local. We organise a number of trainings, putting people together, representatives from farmers' federations, using obviously experts from Central Africa, but also from West Africa to come to DRC to transfer knowledge and competencies and also share the story. So that's maybe on my already answering the third question on Central Africa, the advice that it takes a bit of time and time and investment to really, I think if I have to put myself from the outside of Coleacp and the kind of organization and family we represent, it takes time, it takes efforts, and it's not, we try to make it more straightforward and we try to continuously improve how we function and how we respond to needs. But my main advice is to take the time, and sometimes I always take this example. I mean, for me, it's the strength of being within a network, and I don't want to diminish the impacts on the capacity building side, because that's core. But on that side, we know it takes time and it needs efforts, investments, times. But it might be that the kind of the game changer for a company comes through one contact that is established at some point with an operator facing exactly the same difficulties in another country, but he's in the same sector, and that you start doing business together, and that's your game changer for your business. Besides obviously all the longer term investment that you'll be making through the capacity building and investment in the human resources. But I think we're facing such a complex environment overall, and a changing environment, that we need internally within Coleacp, within the wider network of Coleacp, and between Coleacp network and other networks, build as much as possible on the collective intelligence and contacts and smoothing those processes. It's not easy, right? It's easy to say, but it's in practice it's extremely challenging. And number two, maybe on the main weaknesses and challenges that I've seen, I'll come back maybe to one of the comments that we've been struggling with and that we're still struggling with. To really develop a set, I mean, you can have a great individual success story of one operator in a country, and how do you scale it up? How do you make sure that it's not only one operator in that part of the country, but you have 10, 20, 100 operators. It's through the establishment of the collaboration and cooperation mechanisms within the sectors, within the value chains, and the kind of trust that's developed through the operators. That for me is probably maybe one of the key lessons I've learned during the past 10, 15 years by working in these sectors throughout the countries, is that the amount of effort that needs to be put into this kind of collaborative processes, although we have competing economic agents facing each other, but this does not mean that you can't have collaboration and dialogue on a number of issues, and especially when it comes to representing the origin, the country in international trade fairs, or during international trade missions led by officials who want to open a new market for the country. Well, behind that, all the companies need to be working together and need to be working with the competent authorities to make sure that a coherent strategy is designed to penetrate and fully exploit that new market, and that the strategy is operationalized. And that can only happen given the different types of challenges and complexities we face in a sub-Saharan African context. This has to happen because all alone, I fear that it's in many cases very difficult. It's not impossible, but it will make it much more difficult and much less scalable. And what we're looking at the moment is scale. It's how to scale up, how to make sure that in sub-Saharan Africa, all the demand for produce, all the growing population needs in terms of food is met by local SMEs, local MSMEs. That's one of the main challenges we're seeing today. And because if local MSMEs are not dealing with that market, other companies from around the world will take it. And we see it for a number of products. So, and that's one of our fer de lance and bataille at the moment, because we really feel that and usually we see that the small companies active on the export market are those who are very well equipped to enter those, to react very quickly on those opportunities on the domestic market. And that's why it's so important to keep also this export link and this export dimension, we believe. Just an example now, because usually people say, yeah, I've been facing sometimes a lot of questions. How can you be working on export value chains in Kenya while obviously a large part of the population is still suffering from food insecurity and problems in terms of nutrition? If I take the example of a country like Kenya, which is well known, and we have all these images of French beans exported from Kenya, the volume of produce that's exported in fruit and veg only represents 4% of the total production of fruit and veg in the country. So it's just to say, it is not the products which are exported that are the reason of the food insecurity and nutrition problems in the country. Rather, usually what we see is that they can be a catalysts and vector for accelerating more produce being sold locally grown, locally processed produce being sold on domestic markets.
Okay. The second question is from Dr. Susan Awon. She owns Suzik Farms in southern Cameroon. She has 3 questions. The first question is, well, it's not a question, but it's more of a request. How can Coleacp help Suzik Farms Limited in, that they need training and support in processing and preservation of the agricultural products, and of course animal produce, but that is not the area that you work in, but the agricultural products. Then the second question that she has is that why is Coleacp not active in southern Cameroon, the English-speaking Cameroon section of Cameroon, and that they feel left out in the work that you do. And then the third question has to do with exporting to the EU market. She wants support with that and is interested on having a one-on-one discussion or meeting with your office to see how that can.
Okay.
Yes.
So thanks, Maureen, and thanks.
Susan.
Susanna, so it's Suzanne, because I'm listening to you, but I'm reading a lot of information also on the chat. So okay,
Yeah.
so maybe one thing for everybody. So the easy way to follow up on more kind of bilateral exchanges with the persons from my team, because obviously I'm not alone, who can follow into more specific details on countries or value chains or types of support. I suggest that those contacts are taken after this session now, and it can be through an email. I mean, we'll be sharing, Maureen, you share Marie-Hélène and my contact details, and then we'll centralize and dispatch throughout the team. And then the process is quite straightforward. It's entering a discussion, a relationship. There's an application for support that can be filled in, and then we start looking at what areas we can be working upon together. So that's one thing on how to initiate. Now the second part, yes, in the English speaking part of Cameroon, it is true. Historically, we've been weaker and less present. As in many countries, we are not so present in some regions than in others. I just want to maybe highlight the kind of, I know maybe it sounds we sound like a big organization, but we're smaller. So it's a team of less than 50 people, 53 countries. So historically, yes, we're trying to do as much as we can, the best we can, but we will never be able to exhaustively answer all the needs and all the issues throughout Sub-Saharan Africa. That's for sure. Nonetheless, we can provide a first level of answer in any case. And in this case, there's no reason why, and we have been providing support in the English-speaking part of Cameroon, not as much, but we have been. But obviously, if Suzanne will be more than welcome to receiving your, to exchange more in depth after this session with the persons from the team in charge of Cameroon, and see how we can increase support and tailor the support to your needs.
Okay. The next question is from Mr. Joseph Gavi. He's saying that the processed food trade seems to be growing well between Africa and the EU. That are there any prognosis for how this segment is expected to develop? And then he has a second question. How complicated is it to introduce new vegetable foods into the EU market?
Okay, so
yeah, he's on the chart too. Yeah. Sorry, I'm reading.
Okay, so on the first question, Joseph, so I will say yes and no. It depends on what type of processing we're talking about. The main issue with processing, obviously, is that we need to be looking at associated logistics and potentially size or weight it represents, and the reduction in competitiveness it brings of exporting a processed product over long distances compared to processed products being traded at a domestic and regional level. But it's not the case for all products. Huh? So, I mean, it depends really on each product, each segment. Are we air freighting? Are we sea freighting? I would say overall, there's a positive trend, and that absolutely needs to be reinforced. But we need to be increasingly also looking at, and where we feel that the true potential is in terms of processing food, it's more at the domestic and regional level, probably. Huh? If we look at the bulk of the potential demand and business opportunities, we see it really there. It does not say that there aren't any opportunities and that it's not going well on the European market, but the analysis has to be performed on because, for instance, if we take the cases of juices, juices is quite an interesting case, because you can reach quite some complexities on how to move large quantities of juice, and what kind of packaging then are you using? Should you be transporting it in 1,000 liters kind of bulk containers, and then how fresh can it stay? It's a bit complex. I can't go into obviously all the details now. Main message is that where we feel obviously that there is definitely and where the opportunity should be better leveraged, it's at a domestic and regional level. and overall processing should be reinforced. It's adding value, and there are different levels of processing, which imply different types of machinery and different types of competencies, different types of management systems, which we're confident can be fully implemented, fully absorbed. But it depends obviously on the size, scale, access to financial capacity.
Then the second question about the new vegetable. How complicated is it to introduce new vegetable foods into the EU market? He's wondering if they fall under the ethnic vegetables category.
Yeah, on the leafy vegetables, we had that quite a lot during the past few years. The very difficult thing is once you start trying to enter the herbal medicine segments and stuff like that. But usually, if you're in fresh produce that's made for consumption, it's not always that complex. I haven't heard during the past 5 years a lot of specific issues on price. It was more on the pharmaceutical medicinal side, products which were really not recognized as such and probably used as such in countries of origin. But I haven't recalled really any specific issues, but it can be that they are.
Okay. Then Almaz has a question that how does Coleacp intend to help local farmers or entrepreneurs, especially from West Africa, during this COVID-19 period?
Thanks, Almaz, and good morning. Thanks for the question. Well, I'll refer back to what I kind of very briefly presented in our action plan. Again, Coleacp is a lot about putting people together. It's technical assistance, it's capacity building, 3 dimensions, the health and safety part. So it's providing the tools to entrepreneurs to reorganize their operations with social distancing, etc., and rebuild up some efficiency in terms of their organization. On the business skill side, so it's through e-coaching, individual e-coaching, collective sessions on cash, HR management, but it's also on the processing side. It's determining to what extent can the business model be adapted, modified to reorientate the production to process it directly or indirectly. And on the food security side, it's about trying to work with relays in several countries to centralize what the quantities of produce which are available and which can't find a market at the moment. And that's what we're piloting in Côte d'Ivoire. We'll be piloting now and next week in Côte d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Guinea, Kenya, Nigeria. I'm forgetting one. Yeah, I'm forgetting one. So that's in a nutshell what we'll be doing, and obviously all the time trying as much as possible to link up with financial intermediaries who could offer some financial solutions, because obviously and what we're also doing obviously is advocating at the level of REC, at the level of the EU, at the level of national authorities, because there are a number of probably fiscal reliefs that could be in terms of VAT payments and making sure that those kind of quick cash wins for entrepreneurs are ensured. We see a wide variety of situations. So we saw some very interesting measures taken in East Africa on that regard, which should potentially be replicated in West Africa. But that goes beyond the remit of our direct influence. This is really about what national competent authorities and national governments decide to do to support their sectors. But clearly, some cash relief is usually needed.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I'm just aware of timing because I have another meeting coming up. So
okay.
I have 5 minutes really left.
Okay. Your last question sort of addressed some of the issue, a section of the question by Susan also, asking if there is any support available for African diaspora entrepreneurs to curb the losses, but you've just addressed it. So I'm going to go to Mr. Sif's question. He's asking that with the impact and lesson from COVID-19 to international trade, especially to export of produce of African produce to Europe, how can Coleacp help and train African farmers to develop their internal market to boost income instead of relying on exports? That Africans need to develop their own market for future sustainability.
Yes, I can only agree with that, and I say that's done on a continuous basis through the support we're providing. Again, I can give other figures now. I mentioned, so we need to stop with this conception that all the food goes out of the continent. We need to base ourselves on data. So if I only take West Africa, total production of fruit and veg throughout West Africa, we're talking about 60 million, at least 60 million tons of fruit and veg which is produced in West Africa. West Africa, let's say 15 countries. The total volume of produce from 79 ACP countries, fruit and veg, which is exported to the EU, it's 1.5 million. Just to give an idea of the scale. So we strongly feel that there are still some business opportunities, and this link with the European market is very important because it does enable to kind of have also these latest technologies which are going to be applied on the production side, on the distribution side, but we cannot overemphasize enough the opportunities which rely on the domestic and regional markets. But in order to have the development of these clusters and virtuous circles, we are in dialogue with local retailers, with local logisticians, because it's not only about production, as you all know. Once the produce is there, it needs to be brought to the market. And one major part, obviously, one major thing that comes back to us is a lot of operators say, yes, because we want produce to be on domestic markets, produce of equal quality, obviously, that the produce that's exported to the EU. Then there needs to be also some consumer awareness raising on what's the difference from a quality perspective between a product that's good and a product that's not so good. So a product where the grower has sprayed maybe chemicals which he shouldn't have been spraying, and products which comply with a rational and good use of plant protection products. How can the consumer make the difference, and how will he be paying slightly more for the product that does respect that, and which encourages a gradual professionalization of the entire agricultural sector throughout sub-Saharan Africa? It's a question of the producers, the traders, the consumers, the civil society, the competent authorities. It's everybody. It's the marketplaces. It's an effort. It's a global effort. And what we can bring is the skills, competencies to professionalize as much as possible the operators. But I think you'll realize now we will not be able to bring the answers, all the answers everywhere on the scale that is needed. Hence, that's why partnerships and alliances are more important than ever.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. I know you don't have, but this last question is from Katarina. She's asking if there is a Coleacp representation in Congo DRC, and do you have specific projects? She also wants to know if organic farming is part of your program for Central Africa.
So yes, we work a lot on organic farming. We don't have any formal representation in DRC, but I think the persons from my team would be delighted to further exchange with Suzanne on the situation in DRC, if that's
with Katarina.
Katarina, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, with Katarina in DRC to see what we have been doing, what we're planning to be doing. The first office that will be opening in Sub-Saharan Africa will be in Nairobi in a couple of weeks. Up until now, we haven't opened any physical offices because we rely on the partnerships with the local associations. The reason why we're doing that in East Africa is that it comes with an obligation through the mobilization of funds that we've obtained to intervene in East Africa. So we'll have a physical representation in Nairobi, but we don't have a formal relay in DRC. We're working a lot with expertise from Cameroon, for instance, in DRC.
Okay.
Trainers and experts from Cameroon.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jeremy, for the presentation and for all the clarification with the response to the questions. And thank you also for giving the permission for us to share your email. I'm going to send the recording to all the people that are present and the ones that also registered. If there's anyone that has a question that wants to have a direct contact with Coleacp, you can always contact them. All the information will be there. And if there's anything, maybe if you watch the presentation again and there is an issue you need clarification on, you can always send an email through the email addresses we'll give to you. And thank you very much for participating in this seminar. And we hope that you also join us in our other programs that we plan for in the future with Coleacp. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maureen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for an interesting presentation.
Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Maureen.
Bye, Steve. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a
Bye,
nice
everyone.
weekend.
Bye.
Good speaking.
Okay.